Let's see. We talked a little bit about my background. My name is DeRise, and I work at Southeastern University. I work in the admissions department. And I have worked as an educator as well, but most of my experience is in admissions. So, as was mentioned, I do have a master's degree in online college teaching, and I am working on my doctorate in instructional design and technology. It's an educational doctorate. So the majority of my experience, as I said, has been working in admissions. I've been working in education since 1999, but I have 5 years teaching experience, and that has been in journalism, digital graphic arts, TV production, video production, web design, photography, and digital photography. Right there I was actually giving a lecture on color theory in a digital graphic arts class on digital drawing. All right, so as you can see, back then I was a bit younger and a little heavier, but I was teaching. So one of the benefits of having taught digital graphic arts is that you learn a lot about how to create digital media. And this is a web page from one of my websites. This is basically what I call a landing page where potential students and current students who are looking for information on financial aid can access links to government websites, information on scholarships. There are a number of scholarship links right here on the web page, and of course information on accreditation and how to determine whether or not the school that you want to attend is properly accredited. You'll hear lots of schools claim that, sure, we're accredited. Yes, but what kind of accreditation do you have? Are you regionally accredited or nationally accredited? National sounds better, but it actually isn't. Those credits usually don't transfer to other colleges. That's important to know. So this link right here can help potential students to determine whether or not the school that they're attending is one that's going to work for them. I also have some blogs on the internet. This is on Google Blogs. This is my WordPress blog and live journal. I also have put out some online lessons. This one is on the value of validation in education. And this is my YouTube channel. I have a number of video lessons on there on anything from video production to digital graphic arts and education related lessons. So before we start, I want to pose to you a question. And I don't want you to answer it now. I just want you to think about this question. Okay? Just hold it in your mind. What would you say if I told you that all communication is a way for people to get what they want from other people? What would you say? Okay, so think about that. Now in today's presentation, we're going to talk about the growth of online education. We're going to talk about adult learners, the growing dropout rate, the theoretical framework of transactional distance, instructor immediacy, peer counseling, the community of inquiry, and something else, and what you need to look for in online classes if you plan on taking it. So let's talk first about how online education is growing. Back in 1999, I was working for a local college, it was a technical college, and I taught there for 4 years. And then I ended up going into the public school system, taught at a high school for a year. And then I went into the area of admissions, which is basically helping students get into their degree programs. And I went to work for a private, for-profit college. And at that college, their focus was on mostly adult learners. They had an online program. And back then, most of the online programs were with private for-profit colleges. They were not with public institutions. They were rarely with public institutions. Now, they're all over the place. I mean, and just about any college you talk to has an online program, so it's much more common now. But back then, most of your students were basically just homeschooled students. They didn't necessarily have access to a regular school system, or, the regular school system just didn't work for them. You had single parents who were too busy to take care of their kids and go to school at the same time, so bringing the school to them worked quite well for them. And then you have adult learners, which are basically working adults and baby boomers. So let's look at the definition of adult learners. What is that exactly? Well, what we're talking about are students 26 years and older. So how many of you would say you fit into that category? Okay. All right, me too. I'm an adult learner. 26 years and older. So why is this an important demographic? Why is it important enough that they have their own title? Why are colleges focusing on this demographic? Well, it's very simple. We're living longer. We're working longer. And we're learning new skills. I'm sure you've heard about how a lot of people are having to go back to school for continuing education. Maybe they need to learn a new aspect of their field. And then, of course, we have people who are starting new careers. And they're about to retire. Well, that's crazy. Or I should say they're about to reach retirement age. So why would you have to start a new career? Well, we have industries that are shutting down. We also have jobs that are shutting down. Or they're being outsourced to other countries. Or we also have automation, robotics. There's a radio program that I've listened to several times. It's an ongoing series about robot-proof jobs, where they try to help people figure out what job, what career they can go after, where they won't have to worry about losing their job to a robot or a computer. So, as we have a growing online education industry, and we do, it's been growing quite a bit, we also have a growing dropout rate. In 2009, the U.S. Department of Education reported that the dropout rate was 6 to 7 times higher among online students than among students in campus-based programs. So, obviously, this is a retention problem. And this is a concern for not only universities and colleges, but also for the government, because they're spooning out millions of dollars in financial aid. Most students who go to college access financial aid. And most financial aid is not free grants. Most financial aid is student government loans. So what ends up happening is they incur a lot of bad debt if they drop out. See, when they drop out, they're not necessarily able to afford to pay off that tuition that they owe, because they haven't completed the degree that they went to the school in the first place for. So that's something to be concerned about. So what causes this dropout rate? Well, when students were interviewed about their online classes, they complained about feelings of disconnectedness, feelings of separation, feelings of isolation, and a loss of motivation. So let's look at motivation. A loss of motivation. What are the results of that? Well, usually they participate less when they lose their motivation. And that's not just about participating less in the activities, it's also about logging into the online class less. When you don't log into your class, you could miss out on important information. Oftentimes professors will post updates or reminders. And even if you have the syllabus of the class to look back on, there's a schedule in there usually, that schedule might not be accurate. So you want to log into your class so that you don't miss anything. You want to log in regularly. So you might miss something if you don't. And what are the results of that? You might see a decline in your grades because you missed an assignment or you didn't submit it properly. There was some aspect of it that you missed out on. Or you didn't post a message on the discussion board that you were supposed to post. So you get a decline in grades, and what happens when you get a decline in grades? More loss of motivation. Then you participate even less than before. You log in less, and this cycle continues until you spiral into failure or you withdraw from the class. It's very common. It is a growing problem. So a researcher by the name of Dr. Michael G. Moore, he developed in 1993 a theoretical framework which was primarily used to study different aspects of communication among geographically, pedagogically, and temporarily separated students and instructors participating in online classes. And it argues that transactional distance can cause feelings of separation for online students, leading them to drop out of online classes. So we've got a problem. The good news is that it's been defined at this point. So now we know that we need to do some research on how to solve this problem. And we're looking at 3 very well-known theories on how to do that: instructor immediacy, peer counseling, and the community of inquiry. Let's look at instructor immediacy. Okay, this was developed by Dr. Ben Arbaugh in 2001 and addressed the concern of retention by exercising instructor immediacy behaviors in the hopes of improving student satisfaction levels. Now, the hope was that he could compensate for the lack of human interaction that students experience in online programs. So, let's look at some examples of what this is. Okay, responding to students within 24 hours, holding online office hours, holding telephone office hours, and posting grades within 24 to 48 hours of their submission. So when we're talking about responding to students within 24 hours, we're talking about when, say, a student sends an email or sends a text message or some kind of message to the instructor, and the instructor is going to be available. They posted those hours. This is when I'm going to be available to communicate with you through email and text. That is a really good way of setting up that immediacy behavior. Online office hours as well, and of course telephone office hours. Again, it's where the instructor says, during this time you can call me if you have a question about something. I will be available. I've committed this time to you. So this did help, but it didn't help enough. It was not enough to solve the problem. Another idea, peer counseling. This is a great idea. These are students, and they're in online programs, or they've graduated from online programs, but they're available to counsel potential students. Drs. Duff and Quinn in 2006 decided that retention issues in online learning could be reduced by using student peers as counselors to potential students before they would enroll in online programs. Sounds like a great idea. What are some examples of that? Well, this is a scenario where these peer students are describing how online works. So it's a very logical thing. You do this, this is what happens. Then they talk about what it's like, the experience of it. This is how I feel in my online classes. This is my experience of it. And then describing the benefits of online and the drawbacks. What are the pros and cons? And then most importantly, answering the potential students' questions. Now, they're not necessarily going to know what to ask in the beginning. That's why they need to talk to the peers about their experiences first, so that they will have these questions. But at that point, they have plenty of questions. So this is another great idea, but it doesn't solve the problem. It only prevents it. Think about it. Say you decide, it's not going to work for me. I'm not going to do online. Well, all you've done is you've avoided the problem. What if you're one of those students who says, I do want to do this? And you don't realize that it's not going to work for you. So you enroll in a program, and you become one of those statistics. They haven't solved the problem for you at that point. All they're doing is basically helping students who are not good online students to avoid becoming online students. So, what are some other options? the community of inquiry. So, a community of inquiry. This is an educational community. It's a group of individuals who collaboratively engage in purposeful, critical discourse and reflection to construct personal meaning and confirm mutual understanding. The community of inquiry theoretical framework represents a process of creating a deep and meaningful learning experience through the development of 3 interdependent elements: social presence, cognitive presence, and teaching presence. So this is what it looks like. If you have a good balance of all 3 of these, if you look in the middle there, you're going to see that you're going to have a good online educational experience. So this is a basic overview of what to look for, in the community of inquiry. Under cognitive presence, we have different categories. Triggering events, and an indicator of that would be like a sense of puzzlement. Another category would be exploration, and that's where there's an information exchange. Integration, that's where we've got connecting ideas. Resolution, applying new ideas. Then the category of social presence. One category is emotional expression, where students are feeling their emotions. Open communication. This is where they feel like they're in a risk-free environment for expression. And then group cohesion, where students are encouraging collaboration. And then the third category of the community of inquiry, teaching presence. So different aspects of that are instructional management, where there are defining and initiating discussion topics. Building understanding, where there is a sharing of personal meaning, and direct instruction, which is where the instructor is focusing on the discussion. So, let's look at this in a little more detail. Cognitive presence. This is the extent to which learners are able to construct and confirm meaning through sustained reflection and discourse. So, when you think of cognitive, you think of what's going on in the mind, right? But this is about more than that. This is about the interaction as well. Now, this aspect of the community of inquiry, in my opinion, is the least about assisting in retention. It's more about improving learning for this element of the community of inquiry. And again, we talk about some of the different aspects of it. Triggering events, exploration, where there's brainstorming, there's integration, which is a synthesis of relevant information, and resolution, problem solving, resolution, testing applications of the theories that you're learning. So again, cognitive presence is not just about what's going on in the head of the student, it's also about the collaboration. So why is cognitive presence important? Well, it is based on the iterative relationship between personal understanding and shared dialogue. Okay? So it's not just about me as the student or you as the student, it's also about us communicating. The primary focus is on what's going on in the student's mind. But this model integrates these 2 aspects in a cycle, beginning with a question or puzzle called a triggering event, or just a general awareness that something isn't making sense. The learner then explores the available information and alternatives to make sense of the problem and connects this new information to previously learned concepts. Finally, the learner takes action to solve the problem or answer the question based on their newly integrated understanding. So here's some examples of cognitive presence. Confirming understanding of tasks, assessing learning strategies and work processes, and or proposing corrections to these processes, reminding others of tasks and encouraging them to focus on or to contribute to tasks, resources, and activities. So this could be the kind of thing where students in a class are working together on an assignment, and it's almost like a business interaction. They're saying,
okay, John, you go ahead and take care of this, and I'll take care of that in our collaborative work. Helping with tasks, processes, or products of learning, managing the movement through learning phases or tasks. So, the next aspect, and I think that this one, in my opinion, has more of a balance between the benefit to learning and the benefit to retention. Teaching presence. A method of online instruction where the professor includes instructional elements, live video of the professor, live audio of the professor, pictures of the professor, recordings of the professor, comments by the professor, and so on, which make the online presence of feelings of the professor greater, have been shown to influence online students' feelings of emotional connectedness that may be missing in online courses. The definition of instructor presence includes 3 different categories of activities. They are direct instruction, facilitating discourse, and design and administration. So let's look at the breakdown of what we're talking about here. We have the instructional design and organization, which is where the instructor is developing curriculum. They design group and individual activities. They set the schedule. They provide guidelines for interaction. Then there's a direct instruction. They provide intellectual and scholarly leadership. They demonstrate subject matter and pedagogical expertise. And then the facilitating of discourse. So that's encouraging students to talk to each other. Actively participates in discussion, establishes and models discourse that sustains social presence. So now we're already starting to get into the third presence, that third aspect of the community of inquiry. We're talking about social presence. So really, teaching presence, in my opinion, is the foundation of the community of inquiry. You can't, the other aspects don't work without teaching presence. I mean, yes, it is important to learning, but teaching presence is especially important to retention. That is that guide that not only talks to you, the student, but also gets you to talk to your classmates. And then, of course, they establish and model discourse that supports cognitive presence as well. So the teaching presence supports the other two different types of presence. This part is vital to having a good, strong community of inquiry. So why teaching presence? Well, facilitating discourse is more than simply requiring students to post to a discussion and reply to others. It involves regularly reading and providing feedback on student postings, encouraging participation, moving the discussion forward when it stalls or gets off track, identifying and drawing out areas of agreement and disagreement, pointing out linkages, and helping students articulate shared understandings. And immediacy behavior. See, we're talking about another theory now. We're bringing in another theory. So the community of inquiry connects with other theoretical frameworks on learning and retention. Immediacy behaviors can be helpful when facilitating discourse. Things like referring to students by name. Okay, so you may find that the instructor might talk to your classmates about something you've said. That is inclusion. That validates what you said in class about whatever topic you're studying. You said something about it, and they validate you by calling you by name. And encouraging student-to-student conversation, the instructor could say, so, what do you guys think about what John just said? Or does anybody disagree with what Mary said? Or do you support what Mary said? What's your outlook on it? Sharing personal examples from their own research, travel, or conversations with other faculty contribute to both social and teaching presence. So, here are some examples of teaching presence. Aggregating, finding and displaying patterns in discussions and other communications. Amplifying, drawing attention to important ideas, concepts, both in the course materials and in student comments or other work. Curating, selecting and arranging readings, videos, and other resources to scaffold concepts. And modeling, demonstrate the skills that are expected from students, both in terms of interaction and analysis. So there are a number of reasons why you need that teaching presence in the online class. You need an instructor who is going to show you the appropriate way to interact with your classmates. They have to model that. But if your instructor doesn't have a good, strong teaching presence, you're not going to know how to behave in the online classroom. You're just going to do whatever. And that's not good. That's not productive. Now we get to social presence, which we've talked about a little bit. Now, when it comes to the three different presences, I believe that this is the most important presence when it comes to retention. Yes, it does help with learning, but it's on the other end of the spectrum from cognitive presence, in my opinion. The ability of participants to identify with the community, communicate purposefully in a trusting environment, and develop interpersonal relationships by way of projecting their individual personalities. That's important not just in learning, but in retention. So there are different aspects to social presence. We look at the affective side, expression of emotions, the use of humor, self-disclosing. Watch out for humor online, okay? Comedy is subjective, and you may think something's funny in text from the perspective that you're looking at it from, but somebody else might be offended, so be careful with humor. Cohesive, use of inclusive pronouns and salutations, so, being inclusive and being polite, that's important. And then interactive, continuing a thread. A thread is a line of text, a conversation, and the interactive aspect of that is to add your thought onto that. And quoting from other messages, referring explicitly to other messages, asking questions, complimenting and expressing appreciation. That's social presence. So why is that important? Well, behaviors such as monitoring each other's progress and holding each other accountable for work quality and deadlines in groups sets the climate for their group. Effective group work also hinges on trust and comfort level with other students. So building positive rapport and a sense of belonging is vital to setting group norms and participating in efficient collaboration. A sense of belonging. If that doesn't sound like the opposite of feelings of disconnectedness, feelings of isolation, then I don't know what is. So social presence is vital to this process of working on retention in online education. What does this sound like? Behaviors such as monitoring each other's progress and holding each other accountable for work quality and deadlines in groups sets the climate for their group. Effective group work, it hinges on trust and comfort level with other students. So building positive rapport and a sense of belonging. What does that sound like? Effective responses such as expressing emotions and using humor. Interactive responses such as continuing a discussion thread, referring to other students in a message or a post, asking questions and expressing agreement or appreciation. That's where you might look at somebody's post and say, yeah, I agree with you, and here's why. Or let me add to what you just said. Cohesive responses, such as using other students' names, using inclusive pronouns to refer to their group or class, and engaging in small talk. Does that sound like something you've heard before? What does that remind you of? Facebook. No retention problem there, is there? Nope. In fact, that's been growing faster than online education. In about 10 years, the amount of social media profiles in the United States has quadrupled. Since 2008 to 2017, the percentage of Americans who have a social media profile has jumped from 24% to 81%. That's powerful. The Pew Research Center says that about 75% of Americans log into Facebook daily. Snapchat, about 65%. Instagram, about 60%. Twitter, about 47%. And YouTube, about 45%. Of course, that goes up and down depending on how many kitty videos they have. So, let's look again at our options. Instructor immediacy, peer counseling, the community of inquiry, and something else. What would we call that? What would be a good name for that? Social media, right? Liking, pinning, posting, trolling, sharing, tweeting, commenting. Now you might think, these are all what I call validation mechanisms. Although you might think trolling is not very validating, but think about it. If you're a Democrat and a Republican says, I hate you because you're such an outspoken Democrat, that still validates you. Because they're your opposition and they're telling you that you're too much not like them, right? So it's still validating. Now, if you have somebody who's from your group who says you're a terrible example of our group, then yeah, that might be invalidating. But these are what I call validation mechanisms, and I think they're essential not only for learning, but especially retention. A lot of people are talking about these. Content expert Chassie Lee of eReflect says, is it narcissism, or is it our need for self-validation that's making social networking sites so popular? Beverly D. Flaxington of Psychology Today says, with social media, you may seek social connectivity, acceptance, and approval, and can do so more often than when face-to-face. When I was at dinner talking to a friend, you probably don't tell a story and then ask them to like it or rate it. I can't believe I'm going to quote a life coach, but I like what she says. Michelle Ataya says, this need for validation has us reaching out for our phone, computer, and iPad to catalog our life as a way of showing others how popular we are, how slim we look, and what a wonderful life we're having. When we get acknowledgement of likes from posting pictures or comments, it reawakens a feeling of belonging, of being accepted and validated. Therefore, we continue this cycle. There's a somewhat narcissistic element in so much as we have bred a generation of self-centered individuals who insist on having their whole life displayed on social media, and I'm not just referring to teenagers. Now, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. These are kind of negative statements about social media. But really, if you think about it, what does that sound like, which we've already talked about? Social presence. The ability of participants to identify with the community, communicate purposefully in a trusting environment, and develop interpersonal relationships by way of projecting their individual personalities. So, my opinion is that this is the most important element of retention when it comes to the community of inquiry. My suggestion, increase social presence by adding social media elements, or what I call validation mechanisms, to online classes. So there it is. I'm going to add it to the list. Validation mechanisms. Now, I wouldn't go as far as Facebook or some of the other social media sites do, because I agree it is pretty narcissistic, but there's something there. And there are instructors who are adding certain elements. Maybe it's not a like button or something like that.
but some of those elements are already there in social presence. So, as an online student, if you want to ensure that you're going to be more successful in an online class, you want to know what to look for. So, when it comes to instructor immediacy, which is a great thing, it's not going to necessarily solve everything for you, but it has elements in its theory that can help. So you want to look for an online program where they respond to students within 24 hours, where they hold online office hours. Are they holding telephone office hours? Are they posting grades within 24 to 48 hours? This was a lesson that I had to learn when I was first teaching at a college. I was so overwhelmed with grading my assignments and all of the little quizzes that I was having my students do, the chapter reviews, that I was not keeping up with my grading because it was new to me. And my students started to come to me and they said, look, I don't know where I am in this class. I don't know how I'm doing. When are you going to start to give us our grades? And that's when I realized, you know what? They're right. I need to give them their grade within 24 to 48 hours if I can, or at least within the week, so that they know how they're doing. And if they're not doing well, then they can approach me and say, hey, I'm having problems. Peer counseling. I know I said it doesn't solve the problem, but it does have value. Because you want to know before you enroll in an online program whether or not it's going to work for you. So, you want to know if you can meet with current students before enrolling. Not all schools allow it. Some of them won't. Can you talk with graduates before enrolling? Can you counsel with them in a neutral environment? In other words, where it's just you and the student, and you don't have to have some administrator sitting over your shoulder trying to guide the conversation. And then the community of inquiry. You want to look for a program where classmates are required to do some work together, maybe not necessarily in the form of a group project where your grade depends on everybody participating, and you better get that assignment in, but at least where there's some kind of collaboration with your classmates in your schoolwork. Also, you want to ask, are classmates encouraged to share with each other? That helps to create a positive online learning environment. And is the instructor involved in the conversation with video and text? Now, I've worked in education long enough, and I've been an educator to the point where I don't have to have a strong instructor presence in order for me to do well in class. I know what to do. But I do feel it as a student. Now, I'm in an online program right now working on my doctorate, and I've had instructors who have a very, in my opinion, weak instructor presence. And then I have those who have a very strong instructor presence. And I feel the difference. I do fine. I push through it because I know what I'm doing. I've been an instructor. But to those who are not, or who have never been, they might feel like they're floundering because they don't have that connection with the instructor. So you definitely want to feel the presence of the instructor in your online class. And then validation mechanisms. You want to look for this. Do you feel encouraged to support each other in the creation of a positive online learning environment? That's a question you want to ask when you look at online classes. So, here's what we talked about today. First, we talked about the growth of online education, adult learners, the growing dropout rate, transactional distance, instructor immediacy, peer counseling, the community of inquiry, validation mechanisms, and what to look for in your online programs before you enroll. So, let's go back to my question. You can answer it now. You can give me your opinion. What would you say if I told you that all communication is really just a way for people to get what they want from other people? And they're my references, or most of them. I didn't have room for all of them. Okay. So, the floor is open. Who has a question?
It seems to me that you were talking only about the type of online learning which simulates a class in which a group of people are learning together under the control of an instructor, and they are interacting with each other as well as with the instructor.
Yes, that's
My
true.
only experience as an online learning student has been where it was just me and the computer. I would read something, and there would be questions, and I would answer, and so on. And my experience with that has been mixed. Some things I was able to continue, and others I found so boring and time-consuming that I was one of the classic dropouts.
Okay. So, thank you for saying that, because in many ways you just proved my point. That it's not a good way to learn online. You became one of the statistics in certain classes. Now, you had the wherewithal to make it through certain online classes where you didn't feel that collaboration, that connection with other people. You pushed through, but I'm sure it wasn't easy. My argument is against that type of online learning. Now, if it's driving to school or something like that, then maybe that's the limitation of the process. But if they can provide a collaborative environment, even in something like that, I would really support that strongly. But the type of online class that you just described, I would discourage that, especially when it comes to academia.
Okay, Eric, as you know, I mentioned to you that I've had some years in academia.
Yes.
And have always been under some pressure from my mentor to do more and more online. And yet I realized what I didn't like about it is because I don't like to type and read very much. I'm slightly dyslexic. So I find myself now, and this brings a question, I find myself really liking to use the voice recognition software, which is finally coming around. And so I guess what my question is as we start to perhaps go back to where the speaking and listening becomes important compared to reading and writing, if there is any analysis of retention of the same content presented or received in written versus spoken mode. And in terms of the retention and also the efficiency, in terms of the rate of information transfer. The text writing or text verbal comparison is what I'm asking about.
Okay, so are you asking me if there's research being done to go in that direction? I don't know. That's a good question, though. I do know that APA style is still enforced in graduate school, most graduate schools. I do know that when I've had to do some peer reviews of classmates' papers, I've been horrified by some of the things that I've seen in their papers, because since we have this social media culture today, a lot of people will write papers as the same way that they would write a text. There's too much abbreviation. There's assumptions about terminology that everybody understands what they're saying, that sort of thing. But I was laughing when you started because you reminded me of something. When I started my doctoral program, I was hit by a car. I was riding my bike and I fractured my elbow, and they put my arm in a cast. And I was also getting my first cataract surgery. So I was trying to see and type these 20-page papers with just these two fingers with this cast. And I said, I'm not going to be able to do this. So I got on an old version of the software Dragon. Yeah. And of course you have to practically read a book to that software to get it to understand how you speak and your accent and that sort of thing. So I just took my smartphone and I said, forget it. let me try this. So I opened up an email on my smartphone and did voice to text, and actually sent myself an email of that voice to text. And of course it wasn't perfect. I had to edit it. But I could do that. I could clean it up afterwards, and I was able to submit my papers on time because of that. Thank goodness. So there are opportunities for using voice to text, but officially, there's nothing that I know of that's going in that direction. But I wouldn't be surprised if at least at the undergraduate level that they may start to go in that direction. Hi.
I am a university administrator. I worked as a university administrator for 9 years at 3 public higher education institutions.
Okay, awesome.
And I think that I'm ready to teach now. I have a terminal degree, so that I can. But my professor friends tell me that teaching online is much harder than in the traditional classroom.
Right.
And so I want to know if that's true, and what are the benefits of teaching like this for somebody like me who's looking at teaching?
Right, absolutely.
One of the benefits, of course, just addressing your last question, is that, of course, you're not going to have to go to the university to do your instructing or any of the other elements. So many of the elements that you create for your online class you can recycle. So there are many lectures that are going to be in sort of a PowerPoint-style presentation with your narration. And so long as the curriculum doesn't change, you can just keep using it. But of course, you want to make sure that your students feel as though they're being taught. Now, I mentioned earlier that I've had instructors who had very low instructor presence. And the reason I say that is because they had assigned reading, they had discussion boards where my classmates and I would discuss topics within the subject matter with each other, and then the professor would comment, they'd guide the conversation. But we didn't have any live Skype type sessions or GoToMeeting, and we didn't have any videos of that professor with, say, their face on the video and then cutting to what they're doing on their desktop with software like Camtasia or something like that, where it's a desktop recording at the same time. So having that video aspect, especially the live, is really important to, and I'm sure that you would feel that if you've taught mostly in the physical classroom face-to-face, and now you're going to online, I'm sure that you would feel a lot more comfortable having some GoToMeeting sessions or group Skype sessions, especially since, here's the thing, they don't have to take notes, because you can record the session and then post a link in the web page so that the students can go back later on and rewatch the video. I just finished my one and only statistics class. I'm not a math person, okay? This was a nightmare. But I went step by step through each lesson and referred back to those videos of our 1 hour sessions that we would do once a week, once every 2 weeks. And also the instructor had created some instructional videos where I could just see what was on their desktop. And they would use the software, the statistics software, to show us the process. And I can hear them talking about it. That was essential. So those are some of the benefits. I mean, do you see some of the benefits there?
Yes.
Okay. But you're right, it is not the same animal at all. When I first taught, after substitute teaching, I taught at a technical college. I was teaching video production. And then they phased out that class, and they wanted to keep me, so they taught me how to teach other subjects in digital graphic arts. But I didn't have a degree in that. I had a degree in communications. But my co-workers had graduated from the program or some other program in fine arts or digital graphic or commercial art. So they were experts in the field, and I knew I wasn't. But when I saw my students, they were all ages, from 18 on up. Some of them were old enough to be my parents, and they were working at places like Walmart, and they wanted to be a commercial artist or a videographer. I felt that I owed it to them to teach them what they needed to know in order to succeed in the field. So I went from being a content expert to being an educator. See the difference? Okay. So in the face-to-face environment, you can see the difference there. So the difference is even greater now, because you're going from being a content expert / educator to being an online educator. So some people would claim that this is overly nurturing the online student, that it's too much hand-holding, that sort of thing. But I think that that's, and based on the research that I've done, plus both of my graduate degrees are online,
So I know this from my own experience. You're going to be much more successful if you stay in touch with your students and keep that nurturing quality going and feed their ego, support their ego. I'm not saying you've got to tell them, "Oh, you're so smart," or anything like that, but if they do something right, tell them that, reward them for that.
I have two questions.
Okay.
One has to do with the downside for instructors not being as connected because they're not engaging with each other and how that's handled. And the other point I wanted to make was I've experienced online instruction in two ways. One through the reading and back and forth. And the other is through actually watching class and watching the professor teach the class, taking part of it in that way, which I found that much more connected.
Yeah, definitely. So what was your first question?
My first question was how the instructors stay engaged with each other, because you do get something from working with other professionals.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, that's going to vary from school to school, but there are definitely, colleges where, if you're working within the same department, you're going to collaborate. So that's essential also. In many cases, there are peer reviews where, a professor will be assigned to review another instructor's class. The curriculum for online classes is not always designed by an instructional designer. Sometimes it's designed by the instructor. And so what can happen is another instructor will get assigned to teach that class during a certain semester. And through the process of working that curriculum with a class, they might start to see areas of opportunity for improvements in that curriculum. And then they have to collaborate about that.
But I was under the impression the instructors are doing it from home as well.
In many cases they are.
So
How do they collaborate? Right. Oftentimes they will have, like at Nova, they have what's called Summer Institute, where the instructors will prepare for a one-week session. It's like a workshop for all of their graduate students. And they'll work together on that. They will use GoToMeeting or group Skype activities to talk about what they're going to do. And they'll be sending documents back and forth to each other. And at some schools, they are required to come back to the university on a regular basis, maybe quarterly or monthly. But not all of them work from home. Some of them actually work from the university. Kind of depends on whether or not you're just an adjunct or, a full-time professor.
I have two questions also. My impression, I'm a minister, but my impression of many work situations is that it's not only learning the skills of engineering or accounting or sales or whatever, but it's also learning how to work together with others in an office as a team. And when I was studying for the ministry 40-some years ago, I went to one of the faculty and said, I just can't stand so-and-so who's a student here. And he said, imagine that person is a member of your congregation who is a part of the congregation, and that you're being paid by the congregation to get along with him. And work on developing skills to get along with that person. And then you'll use those skills later when you graduate here and go off and serve the church, which was a really useful piece of advice for me. And my impression is that with online education, it's easy to avoid the other students that are in the class with you if you don't like them. And you're not learning those skills of getting along in a team, which will serve you later. That was the first concern I had. The second is cheating. How do you know when someone finishes a paper they really wrote it or whether they hired someone to write it?
Oh, that's a huge question. That is a huge question.
This is one of the reasons that we have all these different types of activities. Because and this first argument for this not being a problem is just on the surface of what they do. You have all these different activities where you talk about a related subject, and as you progress through the semester, you build upon that, sort of like you would with math.
You've got discussion board postings, you have papers, you'll have a private, not a private area, but a student area where they can just discuss whatever they want. And also, in many cases, they'll have to produce some sort of media piece. It could be a PowerPoint presentation or a video or even a recording that is topic related. If you start to see inconsistencies in those, then that's a sign that they may be cheating. Okay. Also, you have to cite all of your references, especially in graduate school. But there's also software. There are websites, and I forget what they're called, but where you can actually upload your assignment to that website, and it will compare each and every line of your paper with somebody else's. It'll also look at the citing of the references, and if certain things are improperly cited, then it will color code those as this needs to be recited, needs to be corrected. But if there are any signs of plagiarism, that will show up as well, and that text will be color coded. And not only will it let you know as an instructor that that student plagiarized that section of their paper, but it will also give you the name of the paper. I think it'll give you the date as well of the paper that they cheated from, or the book or document that they cheated from. So the technology is advancing in good ways for the student and good ways for the instructor as well. What was your other question? I'm sorry.
So there's no way to prove that I didn't pay Avi in Bangalore $100 to write the paper.
Oh, that's another thing. Yeah, there is no way. So long as they cite their references and they write the paper properly, no, there is no way to prove that.
Well, I'll
go ahead.
comment on that.
Sure, go ahead.
And you have to adapt it to online, but we had that problem all the time. And you invite the student in and you ask him about his paper. I had one student write a paper about the history of Singapore, and I asked, so who do you, just repeat to me from your paper, who do you think the key players are and what their roles were? And he flushed and burst into tears. And
oh, wow.
So you've got to do a way online where you get the guy in a face-to-face Skype.
Sure.
I like your paper, but I'm going to ask you some questions from you. And those plagiarism checkers are amazing.
Yeah.
We required them. I couldn't find the name of it now.
But you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're amazing.
Ankle retention problem.
Okay, back here.
Whenever we had these, I forget the term they used to use, some team effort, team assignments, or something.
Group projects.
Group projects.
Yeah.
Students hated it.
Yes.
And here's the why for online in a nutshell. You are essentially anonymous in every course you take. I mean, nobody really knows you. That's one. So getting that trust factor going is difficult. You don't experience that on the job after 3 months. Two, in combination with that, you have a situation where time differential. You're dealing with students who are attending a university online, perhaps from all over the United States, so time zoning and coordinating is a nightmare. Finally, the entire team can be punished because one student is not a team player. I just want to get your reaction to all that is in terms of it being a useful tool for students.
Right. So I did talk a little bit about the importance of students collaborating with each other on schoolwork and on topics. But as far as doing what I call group projects go, I think that puts students in an unfair position because you have to depend on your classmates to pull their weight in order to get you a grade, and I don't think that's fair to students. But there are other ways of making sure that students collaborate with each other on work.
Such as?
Discussion boards. If they do an assignment where it is kind of a group project, but you're only graded on your component that is within the assignment, and that's all you're expected to do. Also, this may sound like it's not really a group type of project, but when you have to do what are called peer reviews, your classmate works on their paper, you work on your paper, and then you submit your paper to 3 of your classmates. They write a peer review, they suggest corrections, and then they send that back to you. And then you make corrections, if you want, based on what they suggested. And in a way, that kind of gets at that group project aspect of it, or that class collaboration. But as a general rule, group projects, I don't think that they're beneficial to the students.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Oh,
so
thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really want to thank you all for coming. It was wonderful to have you here. I really appreciate what you shared with me, your questions, and for being so supportive. Thank you very much.